All right, what's up? So, something that absolutely annoys the shit out of me is people who don't understand the concept of this question of like whether a house is an investment or not. And this is one of those things like whenever I see somebody talk about this, like I just immediately assume that they have no fucking idea what they're talking about, or they're just like trying to sound interesting, or they're trying to like make themselves seem like they know a lot more about uh, like finance or something, or like people who say don't include a house in your net worth calculation. Like, if, first of all, if you have home equity, of course it's part of your fucking net worth. Your net worth is your fucking assets minus your liabilities. If you have equity in a home, that's a fucking asset. If you think the equity doesn't have value or doesn't make cash flow or whatever your fucking bullshit excuse is, then just sell the fucking house, get the money, and then you can have fucking cash. There you go. If you think the cash is worth more than the house, fucking sell the house. The reason you trade the money for the house is because you think the house is more valuable to you than the money, but the money doesn't disappear unless the market goes down or whatever. So that's one important thing. The other thing is like a lot of this comes down to how you like what sort of house you buy, and all this like the situations around the rent in your area, whether you have to stay there, whether you could rent an equivalent home for a better price. So for instance, just to run some basic numbers, imagine you buy a $500,000 home in an area that you can rent a 2-bedroom apartment, which let's just assume you need a 2-bedroom apartment for about $3,000. So you would spend ostensibly on rent about $36,000 a year, right? 12 times 3,000. If you put down 20% on that home and you get a, let's say, 6% mortgage, you are getting $400,000 at 6%, which is $24,000 a year on the mortgage. So you're spending $24,000 on the mortgage, or you could have been spending something like $36,000 on the rent. Now, homes come with maintenance, they come with taxes, they come with homeowners insurance. There are, we already said maintenance, but there's also like random one-off costs to furnish them. They're normally bigger. All these little things come up when you're taking care of a home, or another example would be like taking care of the yard. Lots of little things like that. But all of those things may add up to more than that $12,000, and it may not. If you are in a situation where you can purchase that home and stay under that $12,000, then the home is making you a sort of return. And that's generally what people mean when they say something is an investment, is that after they purchase it, at some point in time, it's going to give a return. Now, depending on the actual specifics of the situation, whether it gives a return compared to what you could get in a different asset, for instance, like in stocks, is a totally different question. Generally, yes. Like broad market index funds do better than housing. That has been true on average throughout most of the country, throughout most of the history of the US, at least the time that we've been tracking, the last 150 years. That said, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to hold into the future. And also a very important thing is houses and stocks are generally not perfectly correlated. Great example would be during COVID, house prices skyrocketed while the stock market tanked. These things are anti-correlated. I'm sorry, they're not totally anti-correlated, but they're not perfectly correlated, versus like something like the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 are much more correlated than house prices and the S&P 500. And then specifically, there are local markets for housing where sometimes the housing market could be down, but that specific market is up, and so on. So there is something to be said about the diversification of a home versus stocks. It is basically a variance reduction technique. So that is also part of a reasonable investment portfolio. I think it makes a lot of sense in many situations where you might pencil out the numbers and see that owning this home is worse than what you would expect to get in the stock market by 1%, 2%. But maybe that 1%, 2% is worth it for you, so that you have locked in your living expenses for an extremely long period of time, and you also are getting a somewhat uncorrelated, or you get exposure to a less correlated sector of the market. So those are just like important things to think about. So basically, is a home an investment? Absolutely. Even if it's your primary residence, it's still an investment. It's not cash flowing like money in your bank every month, but it is saving you money you would be spending on rent otherwise, because you generally need shelter. There are costs associated with it. Is it quote unquote like the best investment? Do you absolutely need a house to build wealth? No, none of those things are true. But I would say the same thing about bonds. You don't necessarily need bonds in your portfolio, but most people would say that bonds are investments. These people who say that houses aren't investments, I don't think any of them would say a bond is not an investment. So anyway, this is just one of those things that kind of triggers me every now and then, and I wanted to make a short video on it. You have a good day.